You know what's funny? The moment you stop explaining yourself, people get uncomfortable. As long as you're defending every decision, every dream, every move, they feel powerful. They question you, judge you, doubt you, and you keep wasting energy trying to make them understand. But one day something changes. You realize that not everyone deserves an explanation. Not everyone is meant to understand your journey. The second you stop seeking approval, stop defending your choices, and stop begging people to see your worth, a strange kind of freedom appears. The noise gets quieter. The pressure disappears, and suddenly, the people who once demanded answers are left wondering why they no longer have control over your mind. You know what's strange? Most people spend their entire lives asking for permission without realizing it. They call it being polite. They call it being respectful. They call it being reasonable. But underneath all those nice words is a quiet addiction. The addiction to approval. From the moment people start thinking for themselves, they are taught to look around before making a move. They want to know if their family agrees. They want to know if their friends approve. They want to know if society accepts it. Every decision becomes a performance. Every dream becomes a negotiation. And every goal becomes something that must be approved by an audience that never truly wanted the responsibility in the first place. Someone decides to change their life, and immediately they begin collecting opinions. They ask 10 people what they should do. They explain their plans over and over again. They defend their choices before anyone even attacks them. It's almost like they're standing in a courtroom, presenting evidence for a life that already belongs to them. The funny part is that the more explanations they give, the more doubts they receive. Because people rarely respect a person who constantly asks for validation. They may listen, they may nod, they may even pretend to support them, but deep down they can sense uncertainty. And uncertainty attracts criticism, the same way light attracts insects. Most people aren't living the life they want. They're living the life that receives the fewest complaints from others. Think about that for a moment. They choose careers because they sound impressive. They stay in situations because leaving would upset someone. They hide their ambitions because they don't want to be judged. They shrink themselves until they become acceptable to everyone around them. Day after day, piece by piece, they trade their freedom for approval. It happens so slowly that they barely notice it. One compromise becomes 10. 10 become 100. Years pass, and they wake up wondering why they feel trapped. The truth nobody likes to hear is that approval is one of the most expensive things in the world. The price is always paid with pieces of your identity. Every time you ignore your instincts to satisfy someone else's expectations, you lose something. Every time you silence your own voice to avoid criticism, you lose something. Every time you abandon a dream because other people don't understand it, you lose something. Eventually, you become a stranger to yourself. You recognize your face in the mirror, but not the person behind it, and the people whose approval you desperately wanted. They move on, they always do. They have their own lives, their own problems, their own fears. They aren't thinking about your choices nearly as much as you imagine. The audience you fear so much is usually distracted, busy, and concerned with themselves. Yet people hand over control of their happiness to that audience every single day. There comes a moment when a person finally understands the game. They realize that no matter what they do, someone will disagree. Someone will criticize. Someone will misunderstand. Someone will decide they're wrong. That realization can either terrify you or liberate you, because once you understand that approval is impossible to secure from everyone, you stop chasing it. You stop performing. You stop editing your personality to fit other people's comfort zones. You stop apologizing for wanting more. You stop feeling guilty for choosing your own path. The world has a strange reaction when someone no longer needs permission. People who were comfortable controlling them become uncomfortable. People who expected endless explanations suddenly have questions. People who benefited from their self-doubt become confused by their confidence. The rules change because the person changes. The chains were never locked from the outside. They were held together by the belief that somebody else had the authority to decide what kind of life was acceptable. Have you ever noticed how the moment you start explaining yourself, you hand someone a position above you? It happens so naturally that most people never question it. They think they're being mature. They think they are clearing up misunderstandings. They think they are helping others understand their decisions. But beneath every unnecessary explanation is a hidden message. I need you to approve of this. And the second that message is sent, the balance of power shifts. People often believe power is about being louder, stronger, or more influential. It isn't. Real power is being comfortable with your own decisions, even when other people don't understand them. Real power is knowing who you are without needing a committee to vote on your identity. The problem is that many people spend years explaining themselves to everyone around them. They explain why they chose a certain career. They explain why they ended a relationship. They explain why they started a business. They explain why they changed their lifestyle. Every explanation becomes another attempt to avoid judgment. The funny thing about judgment is that it doesn't disappear when you explain yourself. Sometimes it grows, because when people see you desperately trying to justify your choices, they begin searching for flaws in your reasoning. They become critics instead of listeners. They stop trying to understand and start evaluating. Suddenly, your life becomes a debate, and you're standing there presenting arguments to people who were never appointed as judges in the first place. Think about how much energy people waste defending decisions they have already made. They rehearse conversations in their heads. They prepare responses to questions nobody asked. They spend sleepless nights worrying about opinions that may never even be expressed. All that mental effort goes into proving something that doesn't require proof. A person who truly believes in their direction doesn't need to deliver a presentation every time they take a step forward. What makes this even stranger is that many explanations are given out of fear rather than honesty. Fear of disappointing people, fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of being misunderstood. The explanation becomes a shield. People hope that if they can find the perfect words, everyone will suddenly understand and support them. But life doesn't work that way. Some people will disagree no matter how clear your explanation is. Some people will judge you no matter how reasonable your logic sounds. Some people made up their minds about you long before you opened your mouth. The strongest people are not always the smartest speakers. They are often the people who understand when silence is more powerful than justification. They know that every choice doesn't require a defense. They know that not every question deserves an answer. They know that explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you is like pouring water into a broken bucket. No matter how much effort you invest, nothing changes. There is something unsettling about a person who no longer feels the need to justify every action. It makes people uncomfortable because they can't easily influence them. They can't pull them into endless debates. They can't make them doubt themselves with every opinion. A person who constantly explains themselves is asking for acceptance. A person who quietly continues forward without permission is operating from conviction. Many people mistake this for arrogance. It isn't arrogance to trust your own judgment. It isn't arrogance to protect your peace. It isn't arrogance to stop treating your personal choices like public property. The world will always have opinions. Some will be helpful. Some will be destructive. Some will come from people who genuinely care. Others will come from people who simply enjoy watching others question themselves. The moment you stop explaining every decision, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice how much of your life was spent managing other people's reactions. Conversations become lighter. Your mind becomes quieter. Your confidence becomes less dependent on external approval. Instead of wasting energy proving yourself, you start using that energy to build yourself. Instead of defending your path, you start walking it. Instead of asking for permission to become who you want to be, you simply become it. Most people are terrified of silence, not because silence is dangerous, but because silence reveals things that words can hide. The average person fills every empty space with explanations, excuses, defenses, and endless conversations. They talk when they are nervous. They talk when they are uncertain. They talk when they want validation. They believe confidence comes from having the perfect response for every situation. But confidence has never been about saying more. Confidence is often the ability to say less. Watch what happens when someone questions a person who lacks confidence. The moment they are challenged, they rush to explain themselves. They defend every choice, every opinion, every action. They speak faster. They add more details. They try harder to convince. It becomes obvious that they are searching for approval. They are not speaking because they want to. They are speaking because they feel pressured to. Their words become a desperate attempt to escape judgment. Now watch someone who truly trusts themselves. When challenged, they don't panic. They don't rush to prove their worth. They don't treat every disagreement like a courtroom battle. They listen. They remain calm. They choose their words carefully, and sometimes they choose no words at all. That silence is not weakness. That silence is certainty. Because people who know who they are don't feel the need to constantly announce it. The world has trained people to believe that confidence is loud. They imagine confidence as someone dominating conversations, demanding attention, and always having the final word. But real confidence is often much quieter than that. Real confidence walks into a room without needing to become the center of it. Real confidence doesn't waste energy trying to win every argument. Real confidence understands that not every attack deserves a response and not every opinion deserves consideration. Silence has a strange effect on people. When you stop explaining yourself, people start creating their own explanations. When you stop reacting to criticism, critics become frustrated. When you stop defending every decision, those who expected access to your emotions begin to feel powerless. The silence forces people to confront something they don't like. The fact that they no longer control your attention. Many people spend years trapped in cycles of reaction. Someone criticizes them, and they react. Someone doubts them, and they react. Someone misunderstands them, and they react. Their emotions become controlled by whoever speaks the loudest. They become prisoners of other people's opinions without even realizing it. Every negative comment pulls them into another conversation. Every disagreement steals another piece of their peace. The problem is that reacting to everything teaches people that they can always get a response from you. They learn exactly which buttons to push. They learn exactly which words trigger you. Before long, they don't control your life directly, but they influence your emotions whenever they choose. And every time you react, you give them confirmation that their words have power over you. Silence changes the entire game. Silence refuses to participate in unnecessary battles. Silence refuses to give energy to people who haven't earned it. Silence creates mystery where there was once desperation. The person who constantly explains themselves appears uncertain. The person who remains calm and selective with their words appears grounded. People naturally trust certainty more than endless justification. This doesn't mean never speaking. It doesn't mean becoming cold or disconnected. It means understanding the difference between communication and validation. Communication shares information. Validation begs for acceptance. One comes from strength, the other comes from fear. Most people spend years confusing the two. There is a reason silence makes some people uncomfortable. They cannot read it easily. They cannot manipulate it easily. They cannot argue with it easily. A person who has mastered silence cannot be pulled into every conflict, distracted by every opinion, or shaken by every criticism. Their confidence is no longer dependent on winning arguments or changing minds. It comes from something much stronger, the understanding that their value does not increase when others agree with them, and it does not decrease when others refuse to understand them. People have a strange habit of believing they are entitled to answers. The moment you make a decision, change your direction, set a boundary, or choose a different path, someone appears with questions. Where are you going? Why are you doing that? What happened? What changed? Explain yourself. Justify it. Make it make sense. And because most people are conditioned to avoid conflict, they immediately begin handing out explanations as if they owe the world a detailed report of their personal choices. What nobody tells you is that access is a privilege, not a right. Just because someone is curious does not mean they are entitled to your reasons. Just because someone asks a question does not mean they deserve an answer. Yet countless people spend their lives acting as if every opinion, every decision, and every personal struggle must be explained to anyone who demands clarification. The world teaches people to feel guilty when they keep parts of themselves private. If they say less, they are accused of being secretive. If they set boundaries, they are accused of being difficult. If they refuse to explain every detail of their lives, they are accused of having something to hide. So they begin oversharing. They reveal their plans before they are built. They reveal their dreams before they are protected. They reveal their weaknesses to people who have not earned the right to know them. Then they wonder why their confidence starts to disappear. Not everyone who asks questions cares about the answers. That's the uncomfortable truth. Some people ask because they genuinely care. Some ask because they want to support you. Some ask because they are concerned. But many ask for entirely different reasons. Some are looking for weaknesses. Some are searching for gossip. Some want material for criticism. Some simply want to feel involved in decisions that were never theirs to make. The mistake people make is assuming every question comes from a place of goodwill. Think about how often people reveal important parts of their lives to those who have never demonstrated loyalty, respect, or trustworthiness. They tell strangers their goals. They tell critics their plans. They tell doubters their ambitions. Then they become shocked when those same people respond with negativity, judgment, or discouragement. They handed over valuable information without first asking whether the person receiving it deserved access. The strongest boundaries are often invisible. They don't require arguments. They don't require announcements. They don't require dramatic speeches. They simply exist. A person with strong boundaries understands that privacy is not dishonesty. Keeping certain things to yourself is not selfish. Protecting your peace is not rude. You are not obligated to open every door simply because someone knocks on it. There is something powerful about realizing that your life is not a public project. Not everyone needs to know what you're building. Not everyone needs to understand your next move. Not everyone needs a detailed explanation of your decisions. Some people become so addicted to sharing that they cannot function without feedback. They announce every goal and seek validation before taking action. Their confidence becomes dependent on the reactions they receive. Positive reactions motivate them. Negative reactions discourage them. Their direction constantly changes based on whoever speaks the loudest. People who understand the value of boundaries operate differently. They move quietly. They build privately. They protect important things until those things are strong enough to survive criticism. They understand that dreams are fragile in the beginning. Goals are fragile in the beginning. New versions of yourself are fragile in the beginning. Exposing them to the wrong people too early can damage them before they have a chance to grow. The moment you realize that not everyone deserves access to your reasons, your relationships begin to look different. You stop rewarding curiosity with unlimited information. You stop confusing proximity with trust. You stop assuming that everyone who asks a question has earned an answer. Some people deserve honesty. Some people deserve transparency. Some people deserve to hear your story. Others only deserve your decision, because your reasons belong to a place they have never earned the right to enter. Most people think freedom is something they gain. They imagine it as a destination, a reward waiting somewhere in the future. They tell themselves they will feel free when they make more money, when they achieve success, when they earn respect, or when life finally goes according to plan. But what if the thing keeping them trapped was never a lack of opportunity? What if the prison was built from something much smaller and much more dangerous? The constant need for validation. Validation is one of the few addictions that society openly encourages. People are taught from an early age to seek approval. They learn to chase praise in school. They learn to measure themselves through compliments. They learn to feel valuable when others acknowledge them. At first it seems harmless. Everyone enjoys appreciation. Everyone likes to feel accepted. But over time, something changes. The approval stops being a pleasant bonus and becomes a necessity. The person no longer asks what they think about themselves. They become obsessed with what everyone else thinks about them. The dangerous part is that validation never stays satisfied. It always demands more. The more approval someone receives, the more approval they begin to crave. They start adjusting their behavior to maintain it. They become careful with their opinions. They become cautious with their dreams. They avoid risks that might attract criticism. They slowly transform into a version of themselves designed to receive applause instead of fulfillment. Look around and you will see people living according to invisible audiences. They choose actions based on reactions. They post thoughts they believe will be accepted. They suppress thoughts they fear will be rejected. They shape their personalities around expectations. Every decision passes through a filter. What will people think? It becomes the silent ruler of their lives. They may appear free on the outside, but internally they are carrying chains made from other people's opinions. The strange thing about validation is that it creates dependence without offering security. One compliment can make someone feel powerful for an hour. One criticism can make them question themselves for days. Their emotional state rises and falls according to the responses they receive. They become like leaves in a storm, pushed in different directions by every opinion that passes by. The control they believe they possess is actually controlled by the people around them. Freedom begins the moment this pattern is recognized. Not because criticism disappears. Not because judgment disappears. Not because people suddenly become supportive. Freedom begins because the source of authority changes. Instead of allowing strangers, critics, friends, family, or society to determine self-worth, a person begins making that decision internally. They stop renting out control of their identity. This shift often surprises people. The person who once needed constant reassurance suddenly becomes difficult to manipulate. The person who once feared disappointing everyone suddenly starts making decisions based on personal conviction. The person who once explained every move becomes comfortable letting others misunderstand. Nothing about the outside world changes immediately, yet everything feels different because the approval of others is no longer treated as oxygen. Some people become uncomfortable when they encounter someone who no longer depends on validation. They cannot understand why their criticism no longer works. They cannot understand why guilt no longer controls the person. They cannot understand why approval is no longer enough to influence decisions. The old methods stop working because the need they once targeted no longer exists. The greatest freedom is not financial freedom, social freedom, or even physical freedom. It is psychological freedom. It is waking up without needing permission to be yourself. It is speaking without fear of losing approval. It is pursuing goals without waiting for unanimous support. It is understanding that agreement is not required for confidence and that criticism is not proof of failure. The moment validation stops being a necessity, life stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like ownership, because the opinions that once acted like prison bars become nothing more than distant noise in a world that no longer decides your value.